I would like audiences to please take their seat. We are about to start the session. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are about to moving to the closer of the session, and we are delighted that this session is going to be end with a special session. The theme of the special session, as you can see, AI and governance of the technology, and I'm delighted to invite the esteemed guest for this special session. The session is chaired by the Dr. Seshadri Chari. He is the chairman of China Study Center and Center for Indo-Pacific, Department of Geopolitics and International Relations, Manipal Academy of Higher Education. The esteemed speakers of the session is Deepak Maheshwari. He is the senior consultant, Center for Social and Economic Progress, New Delhi. We have Abhimanyu Rajapi. He is the co-founder and managing director, JANYU Tech Private Limited, Mumbai. Then we have the Kartik Bommakanti. He is Senior Fellow, Strategic Studies Program, Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi. We have Nidhi Singh, Project Manager, Center for Communication Governments and National Law University, New Delhi. For keeping it short, we are like to request the audience, please scan the QR for further information about the speakers and our chair. Now I'd like to request Dr. Seshadri Chari to please proceed this talk. And I would like to hand over this mic to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting all this, and I thank my panelists for respecting our invitation and being present here. So I have two leftists and two rightists. Not from the theoretical point of view or ideological point of view, but two to my left and two to my right. So I'm going to begin with, since we are also factoring in the China factor, so I'll begin with my left. I'll begin with Dr. Deepak Maheshwari. The topic, as we are all seeing, is artificial intelligence and the governance of technology. So basically, we know the difference between invention and discovery. Wheel was invented, fire was discovered. So before the wheel was invented, there was nothing called wheel. But before the fire was discovered, it existed. But somebody found out that if you rub two stones against each other, something is created. So they discovered that there is something called fire. If you look at artificial intelligence, although we call it artificial, why we call it artificial intelligence? Because it did not exist before. It was invented by human beings. So some human being decided that whatever we think, it can be commuted to a machine. And then it can store and we can retrieve whenever we want through a particular set of algorithms. So he designed an algorithm and we decided it. So this invention has become so big that today we are talking about artificial intelligence as a Frankenstein monster. So how to govern it now? Because it has become far better and superior than those set of people who invented it. So in front of artificial intelligence, the humans who invented it look like people who are endowed with natural stupidity. So against artificial intelligence, what we have is its creator who is endowed with natural stupidity. So the conflict is here between what was existing and what was invented. So it is again the same conflict between discovery and invention. So can we really govern? Can we really rein in artificial intelligence and its bad effects? And if it is going to be reined in, who is going to do it? Again, is it the machine which is going to rein in itself, or some human being is going to draw the parameters within which the artificial intelligence should function, or its utility should be made available. So who is going to do what? So we have to understand the concept of artificial intelligence. It uses and abuses like a knife, which is very useful in the hands of a doctor and very bad in the hands of a thief. It can kill or it can save a life. So it is a double-edged sword. So what is going to happen, and how is it going to be reined in? Is it possible to govern? And if at all it is to be governed, can we govern artificial intelligence and its uses without limiting its capabilities and possibilities? So these are all some of the issues that people who are engaged with artificial intelligence and the next step of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence itself has certain limitations. It can be made more effective only when it is put to use in a transparently possible mechanized system, which is called robotics. And we have got an expert who is in that robotics field. So he will explain the linkages between artificial intelligence and the robotics. And we have got people with legal background who will be able to tell us, is it possible to govern? And if governance is going to limit its uses, or it's going to really enhance its possibilities. So it's a vast subject, and I hope we are able to finish it 5 minutes before 6, so that those who are in a hurry to go back don't miss their flights. So over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chari, and good afternoon. In fact, it's a pleasure being here at Manipal right now, especially considering that this is, a year later, 1925 was when Manipal thing started by late Dr. Pai, the founder. So it will be the centenary year next year, and in advance compliments to the whole Manipal family. So you did talk about robotics. I don't know how many of you are aware or have seen this video, and please don't rush to your phones right now to watch that video, I hope. So there's a video which is going viral since last night. In China, a small robo asked 12 bigger robos, are you working overtime? Are you feeling tired? Why don't you come with us? So literally, the small robo actually kidnapped 12 large robos. So maybe Raja can sort of react to that a little bit later. Second thing is a different news, which came just a few hours back. So for more than 20 years, Dr. Soumitra Datta, who is now, of course, at Oxford, but earlier he was in different management institutions, including INSEAD and other Cornell. So he's been working on something called Network Readiness Index. It was earlier done with World Economic Forum, now it's under the Portlands Institute, and they've just come out with their latest report a few hours back. Now, the good thing, yes, India has made it to the top 50. When I started tracking this more than 20 years back, we used to be in around 120 or so. So it's fantastic to see that now, yes, we are at 49. But it's got 4 smaller pillars. And if we look at those smaller pillars, where we need the maximum improvement is in governance. In governance, we are ranked 88 out of 133 countries. Overall rank, 49. On governance, 88. Now, let me also look at China, because we are at AICCS. China's overall rank, 17. Not so surprising, depending on what they've been doing, etc. Again, their governance rank, 36. The poorest rank that they have across all the 4 pillars is again on governance. So I think one thing that we do share, both these neighbors, is that perhaps we need to look at the governance of the digital ecosystem in a much more focused manner, even if a lot of things have been done. For example, last evening itself, the government has notified new rules for telecom security, etc. That's fine, but still. Now, it's a little provocative title, Tech is Global, Policy is Local, and I'll come to a little bit about why I chose this. So this is about the Center for Social and Economic Progress. Some of you might know a think tank called Brookings, headquartered in Washington, D.C. Earlier we were known as Brookings India, by the way. And a few years back, the name was changed to CSEP. And this is what we are about. And some of these people you might know, like Dr. Aluwalia, Dr. Rakesh Mohan, etc., Dr. N.K. Singh. So they are all distinguished fellows with us. And this is self-introduction, but I'm skipping this. Suffice to say that long back there was some problem in mainframe of IIT Delhi, and that's how I got cleared JEE. Did my engineering. And 25 years after doing engineering from my IIT, I also did a degree in law. And have worked in industry, worked in many startups, including HCL, SIFI, Microsoft, MasterCard, Symantec. And for past few years, I've been associated with multiple think tanks, etc. Now, if you look at norms of global governance, and I'm not talking about digital per se, anything, whether it's about space, whether it's about maritime, whether it's about nuclear spectrum, anything. So these things take time. And the way these things happen is that you need institutions and processes. So these need to be transparent, inclusive, and responsive. And of course, you'll also have some domain-specific trends. So for example, there could be some specific technologies. So space, earlier, it was an open domain in that sense. Now suddenly we have this low Earth orbit satellites and others that have been talked even here on this platform. So suddenly the number of satellites which are going to be in the space is going to be enormous. It's not just the governments, it's also a whole lot of private companies that are sending a constellation of those satellites. And how do we manage all of that? So that becomes important. Now, inevitably, what happens is with these type of things, you'll have multiple iterations. It can't be just done in one single go. You'll have trade-offs, inevitably. That's unavoidable. And there's going to be long time before anything comes to fruition, if at all, and before it achieves critical mass and momentum. Again, some term which was used yesterday. Now, unanimous consensus, yes, the Honorable VC did mention that there should be a consensus document here, but on these international things, at times the unanimous consensus is quite elusive. For example, on internet governance, we have been seeing this process called GGE, governmental group of experts. Multiple rounds of that have been set up under the aegis of UN, but nothing final has come out yet. Now, when we are looking at this within the technology policy realm, a few years back, so there's an organization called IEEE, Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. There's more than 100-year-old organization. So if you are using Wi-Fi, if you are using Bluetooth, if you are using Zigbee, etc., all of these, even LAN for that matter, the cable that many of us used to use plugging in the computer, they are all standards coming from IEEE. And the IEEE Global President had appointed me as the global chair of something called IEEE Internet Initiative. It was a 5-year initiative from 2013 to 2018. I've been involved in that since then. In fact, we have started on some of the issues on AICCS, etc., around 2012 in IEEE. And in my during the 2018, when I was chair, IEEE actually asked me something about, okay, what is it that you guys are doing? So this is the exact quote. So what I said at that point of time was, while technology is global, policy more often tends to be local. And that's where some sort of tension is. But now, 6 years later, I think there's a time for me to, again, to reflect back and see whether it is really so. Is the technology really global? That's my probe. So what's happening is that we have seen inconsistencies across policy and posture, pronouncements and practice. So that's one challenge. And inevitably what is happening is you have balkanized governance. So just think about this. Suppose India does a spectrum allocation in a different manner, Pakistan does it in a different manner, Nepal does it in a different manner. The physics, the airwaves, they don't understand these physical boundaries, okay? So how these things will be done are actually mandated through ITU has got a process for coordination across international things, okay? But suppose every country starts doing on their own. Obviously, you'll have a lot of challenges, especially in the border areas, but even elsewhere. And effectively, what will happen is that you'll have suboptimal things at best. And the worst thing could be that some of these things, even if you do come out with something in terms of governance, they could be actually counterproductive. So, and especially if it's a small country that may or may not have so much of impact. Suppose it's a small island nation, they may do something on their own, not too many neighbors nearby, it may not have much of impact. But if you're talking about big power, with geography, with huge population, like India or China, obviously it's going to have an amplified impact. So effectively, what I'm trying to say is that technology can have, at least in some cases, national or regional characteristics. Although technically, I mean, theoretically one could say, as I mentioned earlier, that technology is global and policy often tends to be local. Now, China, if we look at its own involvement in the technology policy space, and I'm not talking domestic only, I'm talking more globally, it's everywhere. Earlier it used to be US in a big way, and US, by the way, continues to be in a big way. EU continues to be in a big way, UK, etc. हमारे यहाँ तो ये होता है, okay, last time it was Raja, this type Nidhi को भेज दो, next time Deepak को भेज देंगे. So like that, we have this round robin going on. And of course, people also keep changing the portfolios. I've been to many ISO meetings and ITU meetings, and I've seen from some of the other delegations that people not only talk about each other, not only about each other's families, they also know about each other's pets, for that matter, because they've been engaging in the same process, same people have been going for decades there. Now, here just 4 examples. So the first one, if you see, is so this one is from Wired. This was on November 16, 2020, and this talks about Huawei, 5G, and the man who conquered noise. So it's basically about a Turkish innovator who developed some technology which is core to 5G. So even if you are not using 5G chip of Huawei, no component Huawei will get some money from one way or the other, because they hold the core, what is known as SEPs, Standard Essential Patents on 5G. This is the third one is from CSIS, which talks about how Chinese cybersecurity standards impact doing business in China. And this came in 2018 from CSIS, again another think tank in the US. Carnegie came out with something on August 27, just a couple of months back, 3 months back, and this says about China's views on AI safety are changing, and then it says quickly. So because they have been very, very quick in terms of how they are reacting to these. And the last one is very interesting. Standardization Administration of China, which is like Bureau of Indian Standards there. On September 9, 6 weeks back, 10 weeks back, they came out with this document called AI Safety Governance Framework. Now, interestingly, this framework has been released by a committee which is called 260, and that committee of 260 itself is on cybersecurity. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is that China has been very well engaged on all these type of fronts. Now, if you go through this long document, the standardization from SAC China, very little to dispute. Great words, great graphics, tables, but one thing I must accept and concede. They have gone to great detail in terms of what type of risk, from algorithms, from use of, from data, from etc. Whole lot of things, okay. So it's not a very fluffy thing. It's a very, very detailed document. What needs to be done, however, is to see how well this is actually being implemented or not being implemented or followed in practice. So the document is out there, but let's see what happens when the rubber meets the road. Okay. So these are the type of things that we must be looking at. And as was mentioned earlier, like General Sani mentioned, that so many people are working in this unit, so many people are working in that unit. Again, similar type of work is happening even in this area. And we don't have anything, I'll say, close to that, despite the fact that a lot of people in India also engage in these processes. But what we do need to do is, we need to do much better job of doing and being engaged in these things within India, and then of course going globally on this. Now, yesterday again we had heard about these 3 C's, which I think were cooperation, competition, and conflict. Now, I had also used 3 C's, and they seem to be similar: collaboration, contestation, and conflict. And within this realm of technology policy, I would say, if we are looking at India and China, the way we should sort of engage with each other. First is collaboration. So there are a lot of places where we do need to collaborate. So for example, this Global AI Governance Initiative under the aegis of UN, both India and China support that type of thing. Just 2 months back, we had this Pact for the Future in September at the Summit for the Future in the UN headquarters. And again, of course, it was endorsed by all over the world, all the world leaders. But India was very actively involved in this. China was very actively involved in this. So that's great. We also have, of course, the Global Partnership on AI, which last year India was leading it. And again, that's another platform where there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration. But there's also contestation or competition, if you would like to call it. Now, this is about the voice of the Global South. So as we've been hearing since yesterday morning, that there's a lot of places where China is talking that, okay, this is how we should be doing things, and what we are saying is good for the Global South. I think India is also trying to do in a similar manner, probably not taking that type of pole position, not doing this chest beating or self sort of promotion to that great extent. But this is something which is also happening. But again, there are some nuances even in this, because China is saying that, okay, do this, otherwise leave it. Whereas, for example, what India is offering in terms of DPI, digital public infrastructure, that, okay, this is how we have developed, this is how the basics, this is how we can help you, and you can sort of adopt it the way you would like to do. So we are, I'll say, more flexible and more accommodative in that sense. And then, of course, there's a conflict. And the conflict, I would say, there are, let's say, two specific angles. One is around the process itself. So the way we have the policy making is quite, I'll say, a messy process. It's a much longish process, more amorphous. Whereas in China, yes, you do have, for example, a lot of people don't realize this. Not only China has the national security law, they actually had a data protection law much before India had. Okay. Now, how is it really being effective in terms of protecting the digital rights of the citizens? That's a different thing, and that's something worth examining. So, if China wants to decide to have a particular type of law or a policy, they can move, and they do move very, 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 very fast on that. So that's one thing in terms of process. Of course, often we do see consultation from China. It's a different thing that, again, they often don't publish what all comments came. Somehow that's something which happens at times in India also, not a good thing, I would say. And I hope that more often we do publish comments, except in some sensitive manners. Now, surveillance is another thing. So we've been hearing about this whole thing about social scoring, for example, in China, which became a big thing a few years back. So what type of oversight mechanisms do we have on these type of policies vis-a-vis what type of pervasive usage that can be allowed or should be allowed or can be sort of tolerated by people. Now, this is a whole lot of cultural nuances, and this is not something which can be done only by the government policy, but this is something which is, again, we need to look at what are the specific ways in which India is very different from China. And the last thing that I would say is this. When it comes to, let's say, the population, yes, similar type size of population. Of course, now officially we have overtaken China in that sense of sheer amount of population. But if you look at the diversity, I think we have got more different type of diversity. So in China, for example, you see Mandarin, Cantonese. We have got English plus 22 official languages. By the way, if you go to EU's homepage, you'll see only 24 options, which is the language options, okay? And all of them are left to right, by the way. Okay? All of them are left to right, only 24 language options. Now, we have got left to right to left, etc. For example, right close by, we have got Konkani. It can be written in 4 different scripts officially. Okay? So, we have got much more diversity, I would say, in terms of the languages and many other areas as well. So, that's something that we should use to develop, as was mentioned, in terms of developing our own LLMs, etc., large language models or other type of things within India. I think this type of diversity is something that we should start using much more. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak ji, for finishing it off.
Okay, my topic, I was assigned this, and I'm somewhat, I won't claim to be a China expert here, and I'm not. And but what I was certainly given a mandate to do was to look at what India's challenges would be uh, amidst this growing competition between the United States and China in artificial intelligence. What I'll do is that I'll quickly run through some of the innovation and the regulation that is taking place or is underway or is being processed or at least debated internally within China. And then I'll proceed to look at what the US is doing, and then I'll look at what India's challenges are. Uh, Officially, of course, China is, sort of seeks to strike a balance between regulation and innovation, which a lot of countries do, but the Chinese certainly are at the forefront of doing that. And they don't have per se a law on AI, but there are a whole range of regulatory measures that they've introduced. One of them was introduced in March 2022, and that sought to address public discontent over price discrimination and e-commerce platforms and algorithmic exploitation and delivery of workers among questionable practices and stuff like that. Notably, this regulation established sort of a mandatory registration system for algorithms with public opinion properties or social mobilization capabilities. And the second regulation was, of course, in January 2023 on because of this came about because there was this concern about this proliferation of deep fakes and the internet itself becoming a source of a lot of fraudulent practices. And of course, the provisions of the regulation did work towards, preventing abuses through the internet itself. And because there was the synthesis between generative AI and, synthesizing algorithms such as deep learning and virtual reality to produce text. So that includes, images, sound, video, virtual settings. This is sort of China's move into, regulating AI generally with at least generative AI, and with a much narrower focus on how to prevent misinformation and other deepfake content. Uh, of course, a key agency that is important. The third regulation, of course, was on generative AI, and this was, of course, introduced by the Chinese Cyberspace Administration or the Cyberspace Administration of China, and they, of course, did try and fast track the process and make a shift towards to assert greater control over content generated from large language models, and also provided some kind of clarity in the direction in which existing laws should be implemented, enforced, okay, and how regulation should be applied to generative AI. And of course, these interim measures saw some significant changes from the initial draft, and they also provided some amount of clarification on how to apply research and development work and on non-public facing activities. These changes signaled a policy change or environment rather that sought to encourage innovation and adoption while still ensuring that the party remained in control. And I'll come back to the issue of control, party control over AI and over disinformation, over deep fakes, and more generally the internet and the use of AI generally. Of course, the interim measures by and large governing generative AI have included contents and the scope, content privacy, algorithm registration, training data, fairness, labeling, and these have been the most critical areas where the key provisions have been enshrined in the measures on generative AI. I won't go into too much detail here because of short of time, but I'll just look at, on the privacy side, that they do place some emphasis on, preventing data theft, uh, unnecessary personal information being illegally stored, and also on honoring some uh, uh, some amount of the privacy of individuals and persons, and also access and copy and correct and supplement or delete information relating to personal information. And of course, content also, you must remember, was largely centered on what the Chinese consider core socialist values, that it does not endanger national security interests, and whole theme of control comes in over here. And it does not damage the national image of the country, and it does not promote terrorism and other forms of insurrection that destabilizes China. And of course, there is an attempt to, forge even fairness, especially along gender, sexual, and regional line, and even on metrics such as profession and health. And of course, there is greater labeling of AI content, so that there is a certain amount of certification, standardization in the way AI measures, interim measures are implemented. Of course, innovation in China is, of course, is innovation biased, actually. At least the regulations are, because the possibilities of economic growth are so great from AI itself, and but it is combined with state control, and of course they have built up considerable amount of infrastructure internally in China, and of course there are two types of models or ecosystems that you have. One is the API, that is the application programming interface, and the other is, of course, open source models or format. Of course, if you look at API, you have greater control downstream, but when you go, and of course over source codes and other things, with open source models, of course, you have greater levels of, I mean, it's more decentralized, it's less stringent in the way it enforces control downstream, okay, and also it makes data available very easily. So while so it allows firms to monetize, their own capabilities and support and consulting services, and it also develops a cohort or a community of developers in AI. So from a national economic perspective, of course, open source technology is the most instrumental in accelerating China's broader and larger technological goals in terms of innovation and developing foundational AI models, and of course also open source the model also enables pre-trained models. So it's sort of like it helps downstream models to adapt and also customize, and also it helps address specific needs, and also the entry barriers are low to firms, to individuals, and it sort of encourages greater levels of innovation. And the Chinese government, especially if you look at the Beijing Academy of Artificial Intelligence, for instance, has through government funding sought to create open source LLMs, large language models, that permit commercial use. So there's a greater thrust and drive towards commercialization. Of course, there are challenges for open source AI, and one of them, of course, is there is a lack of specific guidance for open source providers. There is a problem with ambiguity, and this creates a problem. Unlike, say, the API model, and also sometimes you're unable to distinguish between what regulates open source and API. That has been a challenge for them. And by and large, however, if you look at the open source community, as they say, they are by and large consist of independent researchers, hobbyists, students, people who are passionate about developing, using AI, and developing products using generative AI. So I think that is something that remains a challenge, and of course, because lack of regulation, it can create its own set of problems relating to documentation. It imposes a certain set of obligations that you're not completely familiar with, and sometimes even algorithmic registration can be very, very cumbersome and burdensome for users. AI, of course, in China is general purpose strikes a balance. General purpose AI strikes a balance between sort of fostering innovation and exerting control, state control, and party control is very important over there. And the party's interests are very, very important in terms of, because as far as AI's universal challenges are concerned, in terms of safety, fairness, transparency, everything else. But the Chinese do approach this issue with a more risk-oriented framework, and their regulations are tailored to largely reflect that. And if you look at, by and large, notably, even if you took a look at the way they have, formed these regulations, it's more top-down, okay? And the AI industry and has become is regulated accordingly, and they are also trying to regulate and refine existing measures, the existing measures that I laid out earlier. And of course, there is an attempt to, preventing, the proliferation of AI to, malicious actors, ensuring alignment of AI with more what they considered human values, and that is compatible with Chinese values. And also enabling a certain amount of technological interoperability across borders and multilaterally. China will, of course, will play a very key role in, shaping these developments globally in the coming months and years. Now I'll turn to the US. Here, again, like the Chinese, that's where they share this in common with the Americans share in common with the Chinese. They also seek to strike a balance between, risk and, control. But the control factor I will come back to a little later. It is somewhat different from what the way the Chinese look at control. But they also see considerable social and economic benefits in the way AI can generate growth, okay, and deliver for people of their country. And it can also, of course, they have taken steps to, regulate it. And the US Congress has passed a certain amount of standalone legislation. And one of the most notable ones is, of course, the National Artificial Intelligence Initiative Act of 2020, and which basically provides guidance on AI research, development, evaluation activities, and federal science agencies. The other is, of course, there have been other series of government acts that the Americans have passed, and AI that govern and sort of regulate AI programs, policies across the federal government, and this includes the Advancing American AI Act, and of course there are a series of other provisions that have also been enacted, and there are pending bills, around something like 40 odd pending bills before the US Congress. As of about June 2023, 9 bills have passed, and by 2023, November 2000, as many as 33 legislation was still pending. So I think they have moved ahead in trying to regulate the standards and the practices that would govern AI. And there is a move afoot to create this AI Bill of Rights also. And there is also a lot of other pending work being done. But state level work has also been done at the state level among states such as the states of Maryland, which have also passed their specific AI related bills. California has done it. Massachusetts has done it. Washington State has done it. So all these states have done that. And of course, President Biden also has introduced an executive order which came about in late October last year, on by and large on how companies should develop AI and what practices that they should follow, and how to make AI trustworthy, reliable, and also it sort of gives you a set of guidelines to major developers of AI systems from big companies like Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, and others. Of course, now we can turn to just control, and privacy is very, very important. Here the control factor is not so much about state control, it's more state regulation. Unlike in China's case, where it is more about controlling the way people think and act also matters to the Chinese state, because it threatens the survival of the state, which is the party itself. So, but in the United States' case, it's more about protecting civil liberties and private citizens' rights. And there are a whole range of AI-related risks attached to the violation of those rights. And that is something that finds greater focus in the kind of regulations that the Americans have put in place and that are that seek to preserve privacy and protect privacy, and does not allow the federal government too much power in trying to regulate the way people govern their lives or interfere with their personal lives. So that is, and that cuts across a number of areas. It could relate to education, the criminal justice system, healthcare, and so on. Yeah. Okay. How much more? Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure. No worries. Okay. Anyway, this is by and large. Okay. If you look at, okay, I'll just turn to what India faces. I don't want to go into too much what. But one thing that India does face is that it needs to develop more innovation capacity. And unlike, let's say, the competition between China and the US, one thing is very clear. The Chinese are still behind the US, contrary to widespread misconception. And India will also need to, there is a distinction between innovation and diffusion. The Chinese do innovate, but they are not able to diffuse as much as the Americans have been able to do. That means to diffuse it to a wide range of actors within their society and their economy. And that apart, India will have to work with jointly with these joint technical committees that is being set up on AI. It needs more technical manpower, intellectual manpower, mathematicians, data scientists. It needs to preserve data and compute capacities, and that is among the challenges that India faces. And as far as AI is concerned, and amidst this growing competition between the US and China, I'll conclude here.
Thank you very much. It was very elaborate, and I mean, it's important to know what every country has done as far as regulations are concerned. But time is a great constraint, we all know about it. I would now request Mr. Abhimanyu Raja, who will take over from the point that you mentioned last, that is diffusion, and how to use artificial intelligence for purposes other than destructive, like a constructive use.
Good evening, respected Chari ji, my fellow panelists, and my dear friends. See, before going into AI and robotics, I'd like to give you a video presentation. It is just around 1.5 minutes. You can understand better after this, after looking at this video, what AI stands for and how robotics and AI work together. So you can just watch this one. This is a landmine detection robot, landmine detection and diffusion के लिए designed and made by us, and it is under scrutiny with the security forces. Okay, this entire machine has a crawler and a robotic arm, and the robotic arm senses the presence of a landmine through sensor mechanisms. These were the IPS officers who were visiting us, and this robot can climb up the stairs also. See, the entire machine was designed by us, and in designing the weight, the strength, and so many other constraints will be there. So we have used Boeing grade aluminum, and the entire motherboard inside was designed by us. And if you see the robotic arm, actually on finding any object, it operates and it literally tries to open up the surface and see what kind of robot is, what kind of IED is there inside, and based on that they will take a call to diffuse it. It can be either snipping of the wires, or it can be just taking it and placing it in a safe place. So that's how it works. Now I will come to my main presentation. There is a human risk. We are there. So naturally we are in oil and gas sector and high temperature metal and sector. What we design is effectively we make unmanned vehicles, design, develop, and give it to the required industries. The defense robots what we are making, one of the robots what we saw that, and now I'll come to that level. Before going into the robotic systems, first I'd like to give a small picture of how the industry developed. When Industrial Revolution started, when it is Industrial Revolution 1, what we had was a steam engine, right? So that was the first invention of a man. Steam engine was never existing. So from there on, there were several economic growths, and they turned out to be enslaving nations. They expanded their domain by having one technology, that is steam engine. It was running for around several decades. After that, second revolution came in the IC engines and the electric motors. So those countries who had the technologies, they were dominating, and they were able to have more industrial produce. So they generated more wealth for themselves, and they plundered or took away the raw material from the other people, other countries. And if you see the third revolution, came the computers. This is what you see in the image is the old computer, original version of a computer which was as big as this DAS, and later it shrank up to this laptop level. So the third industrial revolution brought some universal area where there is no one single country, probably US was a leading country, others started using that. Now comes the fourth industrial revolution. So if you see the first three industrial revolutions, there is no need for any robotics, or there is no word called artificial intelligence, because they were just coming from 0 to 1 stage, right? And they were changing form of raw material into another form, which was usable for the industry or for other human beings. So that's how it came. So now we are in an era where the machine has to control machine has to interact with the other machine. The process systems, system 1, 2, 3 has to interact with each other. So the requirement has come that the machines will interact with machines. So there comes, one is the machine design development, another is the artificial intelligence, because they have to understand themselves. Otherwise, we have to be there present. In every machine there has to be an operator, and this operator has connected to the other machine. So we are growing in an area where the machines will talk to other machine and they control themselves. So now comes the need for robotic artificial intelligence. So I just given the basics. Why we need AI? Basically, jaruri hai kya? So when we think about whether it is a need, the answer is yes, because we have certain objectives to reach. We as humans are not designed for consistency and repeatability. I cannot repeat the same job 1 million times, and I cannot think consistently throughout my life, right? So we are an emotional bundle. So bundle of energies which are not consistent throughout the day or night or over the seasons or years or age. So we have to design something which will be consistent. So the artificial intelligence and the need for the robotic systems. See, basically when we grow as a nation, as an economy, we have to talk about productivity increment, because originally what we are owning today is all our manufacturing machines, what we are owning are Industry 3.0 revolution machines. So they were not at the time designed for consistency. They were designed for just productivity, or change of minerals to metals, or metals to some other form. So they were not designed for present day requirements. So when we have to use the same old technologies which are 3 to 4 decades old, and now we want to have the present day norms implemented over the manufacturing sector, then we need some sort of equipment or some sort of additional value system where it will enable the achieving of the present day objectives. So the major objective is the productivity increment and the consistency in the quality. See, if you are going to do like a train engine, if you are going to use fuel, coal for a steam engine, so naturally it depends on the driver's efficiency and his temperament, the speeds and other things, it will vary, right? But when you are in a machine, this thing, we can set it, we can program it, and we can set the speeds, parameters, everything. It is like that, and whatever I am doing should match with the requirement of the importer or the other nation. The other way around is also true. So global standards we have to match, means then we have to have some sort of robotic systems, and for enabling the robotic systems we need artificial intelligence. I'll come back to that point a little later. So now another thing is this sustainability and the environment. It's another new problem which the planet Earth is facing, and all of us are grappling with how to do and how to bring back the temperature to the original positions. There are a lot of protocols, assignments going on. So in the manufacturing sector, which contributes for maximum of gas emissions, are the thermal pollutions, thermal related pollutions, and the raw material related earth defects, what we are doing by excavation during mining and other things. So a sub ke liye we need some system where we have to manage it consistently. So another important point is this accident prevention point, where our original designs were meant for productivity. It was never considering the human rights angle, or at that time most of these machines were operated by enslaved countries, and the humans from the enslaved countries are not respected that much. They are not expected to survive long, and there was no human rights, there was no health parameters for them, minimum health assurances. All these parameters are recent developments. So to go with the older technologies and the current requirements, we have to do something on this robotics and AI. So a robot, generally, you must have seen that video. What is a robot? Robot is a small equipment, not small, or it's an equipment, electromechanical device that can execute the specific task with little or no human intervention. Little intervention, we call it this thing, and it is when it is totally automated, then it is called autonomous robots. Okay. So we need a sensing mechanism, articulation movement, power, control, source, and intelligence. These are all the 4 minimum things, because the robot should know where it is standing and what it has to do. In case it is the program what it was given to move from X to Y, it is not possible for some reasons, then someone has to teach it. So who will tell that the road in front of you is blocked, so take a U-turn or take another route. So there is a small intelligence we will give. Artificial intelligence is not a very difficult subject to understand, because if you have a case study, a smart car is a simple case study. Earlier, driving, acceleration, gear, deceleration, clutch, pedaling, all these things were skilled jobs, right? Some good driver will have, why he is a good driver? Because he knows how to accelerate and decelerate in a very smooth way. He will not give the jerks. And the crew drivers or younger drivers may give a lot of jerk. So to compensate the human errors, we are given a small intelligence to a car. So when it crosses 20 kilometers, it will automatically go into third gear or so. Same way, if it crosses say 80 or 100 kilometers, it gives a beep noise. And so many things. We are giving small intelligence. So with the minimum skill level, we are able to give a consistent and a smooth driving. So every day we are using that. That small AI, if it is going to be made broader and broader, then it comes a big artificial network, artificial intelligence network. Okay. The benefits of AI is the main, I'll take it as a consistency. Then it assures safe operations, reliability, and because this AI is repeatedly understanding certain jobs, it is in a position to predict also. Suppose we are talking about some situations where repeatedly it is taking hundreds of parameters every day. After some time, it will know that tomorrow what is going to happen. Or if this is the parameter, there may be a possible accident. So prevention is the biggest part of AI. Most of this AI, what I am talking is towards the manufacturing application areas. So don't get confused with this social media and information gathering AIs. They are in a different sector. Initially I think I missed it. So AI is into 3 areas. One is a civilian application, defense application, and the industry application. I'm talking about the industry application areas, and to a certain extent defense one. So another case study I'll give you where it helps. We are talking about planet and the people. So this is a smelter for an understanding that alumina, right, the raw material for aluminum is made into a powder and dumped onto this smelter. If you see the vertical ones are electrodes, and they are called, each electrode you must have seen in basic physics, small electrodes for plating, electroplating and other things, but each electrode here weighs around a ton, right, around 800 to 900 kgs. That will be the electrode weight. And the raw material will be dumped in. There is a current of 25,000 amps. See, in grinders, mixies, whatever we are using is probably 5 to 8 amps. Imagine 25,000 ampere current is being passed through these anodes, and the entire metal gets heated up to 1000 degrees. Now, the AI part, where it comes. If you see all 12 electrodes, they will not be uniform. The consumption of the carbon or the anode is random. Same way, the raw material is a natural product, so you can't expect 100% consistency in the raw material qualities. There may be a bandwidth, but we expect an output of consistent quality. So, with so many parameters, the gases, the temperature inside, the bottom temperature, top temperature, so there are at least 100 parameters in a given smelter, right? If these parameters are going to be dynamic in nature for the entire day and entire month, because they are machines, non-stop machines, they will be stopped once in 6 months or so. So, how to give a continuous output, when consistent output, when the parameters are not stable. So there comes the AI, where these algorithms, all the temperatures, all the parameters, the gases emissions, all are noted by sensors, and the data is given to a system of algorithms where they will identify and memorize things with them. After 1 month, if you are going to ask that with this raw material, with this temperature, what will be my output? This will be able to extract the data from the total system and give it to you. So such things will greatly save the energy consumption. Also, it saves the human. The human being can be far away from that because he need not monitor it every minute, every hour. So he can stay away. So it serves all the purpose of people and the planet. One is the optimum parameters, reducing the gaseous emissions, and the reducing the energy consumption. And the third important thing is the human safety angle. So this is another case study. Sectors what we address as JANYU, we are addressing the core manufacturing sector. So we make machines towards this sector. We are doing some defense applications also in a big way. We have made some quadrupeds, four-legged animals, four-legged equipments for Indian defense, and the surveillance equipments. So in the surveillance equipment, if you see that this is a surveillance the vehicle is very small, in around 5 kg, it can go below your sofa sets where you are sitting, and it can have a stealth operations. It has an audio, it has got infrared camera. So we take thousands of data from the hostile area, we collect it, and from there we can extract the relevant data through AI. Otherwise, it will be like a CCTV. You have 100 CCTV, some human is sitting there, and if the security is missing, then nothing will be actually extracted out of that CCTV camera images, because it will become a later investigation equipment. It's not useful live, unless and otherwise someone monitors it. But in AI systems, it takes all the data and gives back the input, whatever you want, or it gives the alert signal, whatever you look for, and there is a parameter change. We have a robotics center of excellence at Manipal. So we have a center of excellence here. So those who are interested in robotics can visit the unit also to see that physically what we are doing. We are doing some underwater, we have given this lab underwater robots, and the surveillance equipments, and a robotic arm which has a 6 degrees of freedom. So I think I covered the maximum area. So some of the privileged moments of our company. We have given one robotic system for museum, Robotium in Ahmedabad, and Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji inaugurated that few days back. And another important thing is that, our Indian knowledge level is so good that we have been only thinking that we have to do ourselves, but now we are able to export our concepts. And this is from Madrid. These images are from Madrid. We have exported, and one of our lady engineers went there and commissioned the machine. So this is about us. Any clarifications on this matter, you can ask me in the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhimanyu ji. It's quite interesting to know that some of the things are 100% indigenous operations. So it's 100% indigenous, right? Yeah, that's one thing very great. So we can be proud of all these things and hope more such institutions come up. I'll now request Nidhi Singh to present her views.
Hi, my name is Nidhi Singh. I work at the Center for Communication Governance at National Law University, Delhi. So I was going to use my phone for a timer, but I can see that there's a timer on the screen, but I will stick to the time, 10 minutes. So today we're going to talk about AI governance. I'm very lucky that most of my co-panelists have covered most of the details of it. So I'm going to be providing more of like a high-level overview of what AI governance looks like. So very basically, when we talk about AI governance, we can see that in this presentation, I'll be talking about AI governance in terms of China, the EU, and US. I know that for most of these 2 days, we've been talking about China and the US, but when you talk about AI governance, you have to consider the EU, because currently it's the biggest player in the market when it comes straight down to governance and governance mechanisms. This is because of something called the Brussels effect, which is something that we'll look at later in the presentation. So AI governance, it varies quite significantly across China, the United States, and the European Union. It's shaped by very distinct political, economic, and cultural contexts. And then we'll look at what the differences between these are. So I've gotten like a 5-point matrix to see what their differences are. It's not a very long presentation. It's only the first one that has some substantial matter. The rest of them are actually quite quick. So we'll look at the regulatory frameworks, the goals and objectives, the implementation strategies, the enforcement mechanisms, and then we'll also take a quick look at cultural and political context if we have time to do that. So I'm just going to start with the main one. I think in both presentations, my co-panelists have touched on how the governance in China seems to work in a different way. So when you look at AI governance, you can think of there being two competing schools of AI governance in this world as of right now, the two main ones. There is something that you call a vertical governance model. There is something that you call a horizontal governance model. There are some other things that fall in the middle, but these are the two main things that you'll see. You'll see something that goes vertically, which is what China follows. And what the vertical model basically does is it's a centralized sort of a state-driven vertical regulation model. It looks at discrete laws. So instead of looking at everything, it looks at a specific use case of AI regulation, and it targets just that one specific thing. So both of my co-panelists have talked about this before, but you have very specific laws that target, say, algorithmic bias, or they'll target price fixing, they'll target how algorithms work on search functions, things like that. Very specific sort of laws. That's called a vertical regulation, where you look at a very specific use case of how AI works, and you govern just that. The Chinese model falls more in line with the vertical governance model. So essentially, in this, you have discrete laws that target very specific AI issues, such as the generative AI regulations, again, which is something that's coming up. And then you ensure alignment with state interests for these AI-based applications. Some of the regulations that have come up, I won't go into this in detail because this has been covered, is there's security management, there's a deep synthesis management one, that is algorithmic recommendation rules. So all of these basically look at some specific things. There's generative AI and what goes into generative AI. That's one of the set of rules. There was another about what kind of algorithms you use to fix prices on sort of like these on these websites. And then there's something that goes into how delivery apps work and what their algorithms look like. So very discrete laws focusing on these. When you look at the United States, it has a very sort of flexible sector-specific bottom-up approach that focuses on market innovation as a core value. Which is to say that governance is not the biggest core priority right now. It goes with like a more of a free-flowing way where if something comes up, you govern it, but there's no real sort of hardcore recommendation on this. So you don't have a comprehensive federal legislation on this. There are, of course, states that regulate aspects of this. Again, that was something that's been talked about. So California has some AI laws, Massachusetts has some AI laws. There's other laws being introduced. There is an AI Bill of Rights. It is non-binding, so how far that will go on to be like a very sort of specific governance mechanism, again, it's unsure. But this is very emblematic of what the US approach is. It is sort of like free-flowing. Then you have the European Union. The European Union has the most comprehensive risk-based regulation to AI at this moment. It's called the EU AI Act. It categorizes AI risk into 4 categories. There's minimal risk, limited risk, high risk, and unacceptable risk. Anything that's deemed unacceptable risk is banned. So that particular AI use case, you're not allowed to build anymore. Social credit scoring is an example of this. So within the EU, you're not allowed to build anything that could do social credit scoring. So this is probably the most comprehensive legislation. And this is something that you'd call the horizontal approach, because it applies to every AI application. You take every AI application, you put it in one of these 4 sort of tiers, and then that's how the application goes. So it's in contrast to how the Chinese model works, where you are taking sector-specific things. In the EU mechanism, you're sort of going across all AI applications and you're putting them in one of these. So you can sort of look at this. One of the other things that I think that's come up through the presentations is the fact that China's regulatory responses tend to be really timely. And this is possible when you're doing something which is very sort of where the goal is to focus on fostering innovation. So they have very quick regulatory responses because a lot of their AI regulation is around the idea of innovation. There is also a lot of the policies also talk about becoming a global leader in 2030. So essentially, you can do that instead of like wasting regulatory capacity looking through the entirety of the horizontal regulation, how we want to look at AI broadly, you just focus on like specific target areas like deepfakes, which you know is going to be a problem. The US, again, prioritizes innovation and economic growth, so it's been a little bit more flexible in terms of AI development in order to give itself a competitive edge. The regulatory effects in the US are also a little more reactive than proactive. So you can see the FTC and all of these organizations are now getting involved in how transparency is seen in the country. The European Union, on the other hand, again, falls on the other end of the spectrum. So they aim to promote ethical outcomes. They want to protect fundamental rights and ensure accountability. This is where the Brussels effects comes in. So the Brussels effect refers to the European Union's ability to unilaterally influence global regulatory standards through its market power and stringent regulations. You saw this happening with the GDPR, which was data protection regulations. And again, with the AI Act, it looks like they're trying to establish a similar sort of dominance. Then implementation strategies. So China addresses everything quite quickly. So if you look at it in the timeline, they had in 2021, they had initial regulations. 2022, they've had rules. 2024, they've had comprehensive security measures. The US, it's a little longer. Again, as one of my co-panelists talk about it, there are a lot of rules that are still being passed. The state laws work on their own schedule. The federal ones, they're not as binding. They're still being discussed. There is some ongoing state legislation that's still happening. The European Union, on the other hand, sort of keeping up with how legislation seems to work there. In 2021, they proposed the AI Act. It was adopted this year. And over the course of the next 2 years, it's set to be implemented. So that's going to probably create a lot of change in how AI models currently work. Because when they start implementing the rules of the AI Act, they'll have to redo some of the structures to sort of fit that particular rule, like they had to do when the GDPR kicked in. Then we have enforcement mechanisms. So again, in China, you have strong governmental oversight. There's real-time monitoring. This does create, for the specific areas that are being governed, not everything is, it does create somewhat of a heavy compliance burden. There is a mandatory state alignment. But because it's narrow fields, you have very rapid regulatory adoption. The other end of this is the EU, where you have independent regulators. So the GDPR had the idea to create data protection regulators. There were independent ones for each country and then a board for the EU generally. And if you just track how those regulators did, they actually ended up being quite powerful and doing a lot of work within their countries. A lot of these regulators have already started taking action against certain AI firms. So if you remember the case that happened where ChatGPT was shut down in Italy, that was their data protection regulator that shut it down, not even a court. So the data protection regulators have a lot of power in these places. Similar to the data protection regulator, it's quite likely that under this act, they'll create an AI regulator. Then the AI regulators for individual countries as well as the EU AI regulator will probably go on to have a lot of say in what AI governance looks like. So cultural, political context, I have 30 seconds, okay, so I'll wrap up really quickly. You can kind of see that in China, the laws are more around the idea of having societal stability, so sort of mitigating the damage that such a fast adoption of AI will cause. In the US, it's more market-driven, so there is an emphasis on individual rights, but there's no real like cohesive federal oversight. The EU, on the other hand, it's shaped by democratic values and a commitment to protecting individual rights. It is also potentially, here is where I think something that comes up is that when you look at AI governance as a whole, it's not just to ensure that AI is being done fairly or that AI is being developed in a regime where you can get more economic benefit out of it, but there's also a question of becoming the leader in the AI governance space, which is what the Brussels effect was with the data protection, and it continues with the AI space right now. So I think currently, there is some amount of tussle between vertical and horizontal regulation and which one will come out ahead. But the AI Act is probably a step in, like a check mark in the EU column, so it remains to be seen if China is going to be able to reassert the vertical model. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nidhi. It was fantastic. And I mean, you ended with questions instead of a thank you. So that again I appreciate. So there are going to be questions. But there is one good news and one bad news. The good news is two speakers have to leave. And the bad news is they insist that they are going to take questions. So I think we'll take some questions quickly. Yeah, start. Rapid fire questions.
Thank you. I'm Jabin Jacob. I teach at the Shivnara University, and I'm affiliated with the Institute of Chinese Studies, as well as Mr. Maheshwari's CSCP. So my question really flows from, Mr. Maheshwari's example of the robot kidnapping other robots. Actually, the question is to Mr. Raja. Since you're talking about China, one of the things that, my Chinese friends or interlocutors have always said is that India's engineering capacity is quite weak. And the example that they give often is the fact that India, despite 60 years of IITs or 70 years of IITs, has not really resolved the problem of manual scavenging. Now, you've built a robot for demining. But, how is it that you choose a priority like this when, there are also competing priorities? I mean, is it a money issue? Is it a priority issue? How does that work? A quick question to Ms. Nidhi. You've given these three examples of EU, China, US. But if you look at, the question is really whether governance then impacts or limits innovation. If you look at market leaders in AI, these generally tend to come from China and the United States. EU, I might be ignorant, but not so much. So is there a sort of a flip side to such quality governance? Thank you.
Let me take it. See, regarding this risk mitigation robots, we started with the soldiers. CRPF soldiers were working with us for the landmine detection and diffusion robots. So we had live case studies. My team was there in Dantewada. They were airlifted and they had a bulletproof vest with some rifles in their hands. They were going with the road opening party. So see a situation wherein 12 people go out and they don't know how many will come back. Can we work in such situation? So I have been in entrepreneurship for almost 30 years. So at times we become emotional. Are we useful to someone else in the society? Making money is one objective of the enterprise, but there are several ways of making money. So we consciously took a call because we have been mentored by Dr. Chari ji, like people, so many seniors. They have seen their best, but they are doing the maximum of their energies towards the social benefit they are spending. So we take some inspiration. So we decided as a company that we will be doing only human risk mitigation robots, not the material handling, not the pick and place and saluting robots, giving chai, vending and tea and all. No, anyone can do that. There is no risk involved in that, and we are not serving the purpose for the planet or the people when we are doing the routine jobs which anyone can do. So that's how we did it. Of course, it was a tough job. We were talking about engineering sense in China is better. No, I'll have to slightly disagree with that. Because, see, we exported, I mean, yesterday, the one consignment of 4 tons was sent to Madrid. My robotic system, actually, I have several videos, but there is no time, I'm not able to show you. Molten metal aluminum handling, what is the problem in India is the same problem elsewhere in the world also. We have given a robotic system for Hindalco India and Hydro Aluminium Europe and their plant Madrid. We have exported recently. And one of their Netherlands plant we sent last a few months back. And I made it a point that one lady engineer will go and commission the plant. So that's how we are doing it. Yes, if you take that out of 100 units, around 20 units may be producing engineering goods worth for exporting. The rest are not automating. The problem is we are depending on our skills, our automation techniques for consistency. I was repeatedly using the word consistency is the key for exports or global standards. So we have to automate. SME sector automation will take some more time because it is directly connected with the financial implications because the return on investments may not be quick enough. So there are some other constraints for us. But I will never agree with that point that we lack skill sets. Thank you.
You can take one part of her question if you want. The question that
I think we asked something about the EU as opposed to her.
Yeah.
EU part.
I think that's a really fair question, and it's one that comes up a lot because when you have so much regulation, it does hamper innovation to an extent, and you can see that sort of happening in the EU. But I think that the conversations are slightly more separate. Governance by itself is also a power, and you can see that EU has been asserting that for a long time to come. So if you look at the GDPR, it's not a very good law. It's actually quite onerous, but it has over the years become the gold standard for data protection. Then everybody goes ahead and adopts it, and that way you can actually, the EU can assert dominance in this way by dictating what the standards look like and what data protection looks like. So a similar thing happens with AI. Eventually, no matter which way you go, you'll need to have laws because there is a lot of danger that comes with these kind of programs. And if you start early enough, like the EU is doing with the EU AI Act, there's a very good chance that your law will again end up being adopted, even though it's a more onerous law, just because you have so much regulatory capacity and you're doing such a good job of pushing the model along. So I think that the governance conversation is a slightly different conversation itself. There are some dangers to innovation, but it's not as different as you'd think, because in India, even if you didn't have an AI Act and you started putting down AI applications, you still have constitutional protections. You still have the right to privacy needs to be respected, right to freedom of speech needs to be respected. All of those things still come in. And a lot of the AI laws is just like an easier way of doing this. So currently you are participating in an environment where there's regulatory uncertainty. You don't know what right to privacy means in the context of AI because nobody's clarified it. But the Constitution says right to privacy is a fundamental right. So then it's still there. It's just regulatory uncertainty now and not sure of how to exactly put that into practice.
I mean, yes, the point. I mean, she's addressed the issue about regulation from the EU's end, and its importance also. Of course, in the case of the Americans, I do believe their emphasis will be more on deregulation. Theirs is more market-driven, and with Trump coming in, he may want more of that. And if it can certainly generate greater growth, greater commerce, and also beef up the technological sector in the area of AI, they'll certainly pursue it with greater vigor, because they don't want to be left behind the Chinese, even if actually China is behind the United States in this AI race.
So I just want to say one thing in terms of when you say about the US, EU, and let's say China. Now, if you see in terms of the geopolitics overall, the US, of course, as everybody has been talking about, that it's more of a market-driven type of laissez-faire type of model. China is more authoritarian. Now, for EU, as a competitive edge, regulation could also be seen as a competitive edge by a particular regional or a national bloc for that matter. So in EU, for example, we have this type of experience like GDPR and now, of course, AI Act and Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, etc. And now with somebody like Elon Musk coming up close and personal with the president-elect in the US, I think it's likely to be much more industry friendly, at least in some industries. But let's see how it goes beyond 20th January, just 8 weeks from now. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think with Elon Musk being very close to Trump, I don't know what kind of regulation he will be able to bring in. And with Elon Musk having enormous amount of investment in China, I don't know what is going to happen out of that. So anyway, it's a very, very big question. And Nidhi, your questions are going to be ever permanently there. We need a much better artificial intelligence system. Basically, artificial intelligence, as Mr. Abhimanyu also explained, is all based on the basic principles, core principles of science, of physics, of mathematics, of chemistry. So they are universal. They are going to work the way they are wherever it is there in the world. An atom is going to behave like atom wherever it behaves. So it's not going to change because of geography, or it's not going to change because of human beings. But what is more important is the end user. Basically, the regulation is not for the scientific principles as much as it is for those who are going to use it in the end. So how do you regulate that? How do you bridge the digital divide that we are all talking about? And how are you going to really regulate the good use and the bad use? How are you going to distinguish? That is a very big question. I think we will need some more artificial intelligence to be added to the present artificial intelligence so that it comes up with an answer for those questions which we have raised. So it's a very big issue, and I think we should have all had some intelligence to keep this particular session at a time when there was more time for question and answer. But of course we were lacking in that kind of intelligence. So I'll finish it here. Our guests have to leave for their destinations also. Thank you very much. Thank you for the panelists, an excellent and very important subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Speaker, for this insightful thought and thought-provoking lesson. Now, may I request our Seshadri Chari sir to kindly facilitate our speaker with vote of thanks. Thank you. Thank you for the token of appreciation and a kindly time for ourselves. I request speaker and dignitaries to kindly come in front of the stage for photo session. So in this way, we are moving to the second day, closer of the second day of the AICC conference. Thank you, my audience, for being with us till the end of the day. Have a nice day.